Gap has perfected the art of the Facebook campaign with nearly 6 million followers, which makes me more than delighted to be able to welcome Lizzie Hanbury-Tenison, their European marketing manager, into the retail theatre.
So I'm Lizzie and I'm the European marketing manager at Gap. And today I'm going to be talking to you about how we can engage your social media communities. I'm going to start with a little bit of audience participation. So if you could either put up your hand or nod your head or do both at the same time if you're on a social media channel. Okay, lots of nodding, that's great, brilliant. So as predicted, most people in the room. Now, the reason I want to talk to you about engaging your social media communities today is because once you've really understood how to speak to your audience, know what makes them tick, then you've become relevant. And when you've become relevant in the hearts and the minds of your consumers, then ultimately you're more valuable to them. And as brand owners and as business owners, that's what we all want. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about complex media strategies or anything like that today. I fully believe that organic engagement and paid engagement, as I'm sure that you've heard about, kind of comes hand in hand. And really, you wouldn't put your budget behind content or a channel that you didn't believe in. So what we're going to talk about today is really making sure that the foundations of your social media strategy are solid. So we're going to talk about two key themes. We're going to talk about connecting with your audience and being relevant to your audience. And how we're going to approach that is via the 3 C's. And the 3 C's are very important when you're thinking about social media. They are channels, they are content, and they are conversation. Okay, so working for Gap is, as you can imagine, fairly busy. It's fairly fast-paced. It's a very sort of hectic fashion environment. We are the 4th largest apparel retailer in the whole world, so things are changing on a daily basis. You know, I feel very, very proud and happy to be part of a brand and part of a team that really passionately cares about the brand we're talking about and also about our consumers. Now, the other really great thing about my job is that I get to work in the channel of social media, which is really fun and really interesting to me because I love figuring out why consumers behave in the way they do and understanding the insights that I need to make our communication strategy really strong. So we can't deny that we live in a world of social and digital change, and it really is informing our behaviours. And one of the examples I love to articulate this point with is this image of the Vatican in 2005. This is actually the inauguration of Pope Benedict, and I bet you didn't think that my papal knowledge would be that strong. So if you just take a moment to look at this, you know, everybody's really in that moment. They're present there, they're absorbed in it. And if you skip on 8 years later, you know, how did this happen? We've all been plodding along for the last 8 years playing Snake on our Nokia 3310s, and suddenly the iPad has completely taken over our lives. You know, we're no longer active participants in moments and experiences. You know, we've added on these layers, we've added on Facebook and Instagram and Twitter. And taking photographs, you know, this isn't just a trend anymore. This is a popular consumer behavior. It's just what we all do. And how many times have we been in a situation where we've taken a photograph or we've taken a video before we've actually even appreciated the moment that we're in? I mean, I think it probably happens a little bit more than we'd like to admit. So there are so many experiences online, there are so many pieces of content, photographs, you know, anything you like that people are putting up there from consumers and from brands. And as brand owners, it's really our job to make sure that the content we're putting out there cuts through. You know, how can we create experiences in our social channels that are going to encourage consumers to become a part of our brand and to interact with us? So on to the 3 C's, and hopefully this is going to help you to do this. So the first C being channels. Now, understanding where your social home is so important. And I often get people who say to me in the business and outside of the business, you know, why aren't Gap on Snapchat? And why aren't Gap on Foursquare? And why don't you behave in this way? And I say to them, do you know what? We have to be focused. We have to make sure that we are playing in the environments that our consumers are at home in, where they're spending time and where they're enjoying it, because that's how you have success on social media. You know, for a lot of brands, that does actually begin on Facebook. It's a great base. In the UK alone, there are 24 million people who log onto Facebook on a daily basis. 20 million of those people log on via mobiles, which I think is an incredible insight as to how we're all consuming information these days. And on average, these people are looking at their Facebook channels 16 times a day, which is huge. And quite frankly, I don't know how they have time to do anything else. I mean, It's really about sort of interrogating why consumers are on certain channels. What motivates them to participate? Is it that they like information in a sort of storytelling format? So the Facebook timeline is absolutely perfect. Do they like short, sharp, punchy pieces of information? Do they like discovering breaking news? Then Twitter works a treat. Or do they prefer a more visual medium, so Instagram or Pinterest or the Tumblrs of this world? Really understanding where your consumer's natural habitat is on social media is so important. So it'll help you to sort of prioritize and focus not only your time, but your budget. And I really have learnt this lesson the hard way, that it is so much better to prioritize one or two channels than spreading yourself too thin and doing lots of things badly. So you might be thinking, okay, well, it's all very well that you sort of go on about where I should have my channels and where my brand should be, but how can you do this? So you can do this in actually quite a simple way, and lots of big businesses, lots of big brands have a really active awareness of who are the big voices in their worlds, in their industries. So making sure that you're monitoring and evaluating the behavior of your key influencers and your key competitors is so vital. I mean, we do this on a weekly basis. And what you need to be looking for is you need to be looking for these common characteristics of success. So what are they doing in these channels that's working for them? What are they doing in these channels that, is not working for them, that you want to stay so far away from? Having that picture, building that picture is so important for you to understand where you place your brand. Setting up something like a Google alert, bringing that information to your inbox, it's such a simple and easy way to do things. Now, the second part of this is also about how you evaluate your own social media channels. So, for example, Facebook and Twitter have inbuilt insight tools that allow you to do this, to sort of get really under the skin of how people are behaving on your page, working out what is engaging people and working out what's totally flopping and that you're never going to do ever again. And it's not the sort of thing that you can just do maybe once or twice a year. You have to be doing this weekly and monthly, and it sounds tedious, but it is so vital for your communications planning. So relevant spaces and places has never been more important. And this brings me on to the second C, which is content. So now you understand where your home is on social media, you need to understand what you're going to tell people and how you're going to tell them. And I think a lot of people think this is a lot easier than it actually is, and I've seen it go wrong so many times. And it comes down to the fact that sometimes people forget who they are on social media. People forget who their identity is. And social is such a noisy and cluttered world, and this is why our friends, the Cats and the Hats, do so well, because it breaks up that clutter. When you see this content from BuzzFeed, it does so well. People go mental for it, they really do. But that's because it's from BuzzFeed, and that's because that's what they do. It doesn't work for everyone. So understanding your identity, understanding who you are has never been more important on social. Really understanding what's at the heart of your brand. Why do consumers love you? Why do they trust you? Why do they keep coming back to you versus all of your competitors? So understanding that part is so important, and being authentic, which is genuinely one of the most overused words in the marketing industry, is so important. But it's overused because it works, because it means something to consumers. It really does. Not only your identity, but also your behaviors. So think about how you tell a story, what your brand narrative is, and how you plan that out each week and each month. And I get quite a lot of stick at work because I can be a bit planny and I do enjoy a spreadsheet. But it's so important to have a content calendar sorted, to know when you're going to be bringing people into your brand, into your communications platforms, and why. A good example of this, something that we do, we notice that our consumers, when they start thinking about an outfit for the weekend, they start thinking about that as early as Tuesday. That's when purchase consideration starts. So Tuesday and Wednesday most weeks, and you'll see this behavior reflected in lots of large apparel retailers. We post a product message, we post a product story, and consumers come back to that every single week. It's about training people to keep coming back to that content and engaging with it at the same time, at the same place. So I'm going to give you a little example of a Gap campaign that we just launched. So this was our lived-in campaign for spring. And the talent are just on that billboard just there. And we had Birdie and we had RJ, who was in Breaking Bad, and there are so many inappropriate crushes on him, I cannot tell you. So we put this everywhere. This was a huge global campaign for us. It was on billboards, it was in press, it was on posters. And we tried and tested using this kind of creative on our social channels. And does it work for us? The short answer is no. People just don't really understand what we're trying to tell them, how they should interact with it. And consumers are savvier than they've ever been before. They don't necessarily like feeling like they're being sold to. And this is why it's been proven that the most popular place to advertise your brand is in the Facebook newsfeed, because people understand that it's a word-of-mouth message. They feel like they can trust it a little bit more, something that their friends might say, for example. So this is what our spring content looked like. We made it feel slightly more user-generated, like you actually could have taken those photographs on your iPhone. It's more product-focused, it feels more shareable. And we use the phrase at Gap, lo-fi content. And what lo-fi content means is that it's content that looks like it could have been made by you, taken on your iPhone. And as a result of this, when we compared the hi-fi content that we'd see as a global campaign message, for an example, to the lo-fi content that looks way more user-generated, way more authentic, we saw an average of 70% more engagement. You can't really argue with that kind of percentage when you're dealing with a fan base as big as ours. And when we looked at the spring campaign overall versus last year, the engagement levels were up by 26%. So it works. And we know that it's not just about repurposing traditional media anymore. It's really about making sure that things are fit for purpose. So a little recap on content. Don't forget about lo-fi. You can see 70% more engagement if you work it up in the right way. Know your brand identity, know your brand behaviors, and remember that people are creatures of habit. They really do like seeing the same sort of message at the same time in the week. So this brings me on to my final point, which is about conversation. And we've talked through the channels, we've talked a little bit about the content that you're going to put out there, and now people are going to start talking to you, which is kind of crazy. And the wonderful thing about social is that it does allow you to have this two-way conversation with your consumers. It's not about having a monologue as a brand. It's about opening yourself up to that dialogue and really embracing it. Because nurturing these conversations brings people into your brand world. It helps them see who you really are. It's taken a long time for big businesses, I think, to understand that social media is not a broadcast media. It's not television. You can't just tell people stuff and they believe it. People want to interact with you, and you have to have the infrastructure in place in your business to be able to sort of facilitate that and support that. And when I say infrastructure, I don't mean huge, whopping great teams of people. I mean each week you need to commit to how much time you're going to spend per social media channel. You need to do it at the same time, and you really need to focus on engaging these conversations, bringing people into your brand, nurturing and supporting their love for it. Now, I think a lot of people think that conversation on social media is just about brands giving messages to people. And actually, one of the most special things that can happen on social is when consumers give messages to brands. And I wanted to use a story that happened at Gap last year that I felt quite passionately about. So this is Waris Alawalia and this is Quentin Jones. And Waris was one of the faces of our holiday campaign. And just to translate from American English to English English, that's our Christmas campaign, because not everyone gets that. So our US team picked up a tweet, and it was from a consumer saying that they had seen a poster on a subway in Brooklyn that had been vandalized, and it was a Waris poster, and somebody had written horrible racist comments on it. So we got back to the consumer and we said, thank you very much for telling us about this. We'll deal with it straight away. And so within 24 hours, our terrific team in the States had found where the poster was by communicating with this consumer, taken it down, put a fresh one up. And then as soon as we'd done that, we got back in contact with the consumer on Twitter and said, thank you for your feedback. We've taken this as an action. We've put a new poster up. And for us, this was just the right thing to do. We don't tolerate racism. It's just the right thing to do. And the consumer said, thank you. It's really good to know that we've been listened to. And, we didn't hear anything for a couple of days and, it all went quiet and we thought, well, fine. A couple of days later, there were some rumblings happening on social media. This person had told their friends and their friends had told their friends. And before we knew it, we were within the HuffPost and we were on television channels in New York because social media communities had got together and said, well, this is actually quite cool. Gap doesn't tolerate racism. But the magical thing about this was it wasn't just us and our view. It was that everybody on social felt the same, and they were all united in that vision. And that really is the most powerful thing about social. So that's just a story that I love, and I thought it was just a really, really positive message of engaging people. And so just to recap sort of what we've talked through today, we've talked through channels, so being in the right places and the right spaces, making sure that you're in the natural environment for your consumers where they're enjoying themselves and spending time, making sure that you're evaluating and monitoring your influencers and your competitors, and really getting to grips with those common characteristics of success. Spend time evaluating your own channels too. We've talked through content, so understanding your behaviours, your identity, and also making sure that you have a strategy. Don't forget about the creatures of habit. You've got to plan these kind of things out. And then finally, conversation. So it's not just a brand monologue anymore, it's a dialogue, it's a two-way conversation, and you have to open yourselves up to that fact. And if you nurture your consumers on these channels, you really will reap the rewards. So thank you very much for listening to me. I've really enjoyed being here, and really I'm looking forward to talking to you guys after this. So thank you very much.